JD, what's up, man?
How are you? Good to see
Hey,
you.
good to see you. Thanks for taking a minute out.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
So the last time we caught up was in May of 2020. We had no idea what the hell was happening.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my
I'm not
God.
sure. I'm not sure if I still do. I don't know if I do yet.
I've realized I stepped into it when I said that. So me too. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, it's great to see you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
So I guess,
Okay.
as we just kind of minorly touched on, we did talk in May of 2020, and I think the entire world was unsure how long the pandemic was going to last, especially for the jazz community. So
Right.
now that we're talking in 2023, how did you do? How did you get out of it? H- You know, how did you
Well,
survive?
yeah. I mean, like everybody, the uncertainty of how long is this going to be, and then secondly, what do you do with your craft in the meantime? Uh, and so at first, I think there was there was a hopefulness that it wouldn't be as long as it was, even though we had no idea. And then I reverted to, well, what do I love to do? And that was music. And I called up my one of my best friends in Texas, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Nothing," of course. And I said, "Why don't you drive on up here?" We were staying in upstate New York, and I said, "Why don't you drive on up here and let's write some music?" And he's a fantastic musician, and was the musical director for Alejandro Escovedo. He's now the musical director for Patty Griffin. He'd worked with Robert Plant. He'd worked with a lot of big names as in the singer songwriter world. We were in jazz school together at North Texas, but we had written a lot of music 30 years ago. But who do you want to spend your time with? You want to spend time with people you love, and so he came up. He drove up from Texas, and we wrote for about 3 weeks, and then about 4 months later, drove up again. We wrote for another 3 weeks, and then he drove up again, and we wrote for another couple of weeks, and I probably wrote maybe 25, 30 songs, and of those songs. Well, I said I want to go in the studio and record these. The issue for me was, though, that these were more of the singer-songwriter nature, and I wanted to, of course, and need to somewhat retain my jazz identity as a performer if I'm going to go in the studio. Long story short, decided to go in the studio. Played with some great players, James Genus, who Herbie Hancock uses bassist for. Taylor Eichste won a Grammy a year or so ago for Best Instrumental Album. Great pianist. Gilad Hexelman, guitarist, is on a tune. Obed Calvert playing drums, had some guests on strings as well, and recorded a record which is singer-songwriter jazz. I don't know what it is. At some point, I'm just was trying to make good music, and then a record label, Arcadia, started to express some interest at the time. I said, well, I'm kind of in the studio doing this singer-songwriter record. If you want to come by and check it out. And they signed me based on what they heard, and finished that record. It should be out this fall. And that's what I did.
And that's the one, What the World Needs Now, correct?
No. So when I signed with Arcadia, what they did was they decided to they looked at my numbers. It's a numbers game, and they thought that I had released a record right at the beginning of the pandemic, which really didn't do anything because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, a couple things were happening. The perfect storm, a pandemic comes, CD sales are pretty much phasing out. Spotify is taking its place. And so I didn't have a chance to tour with the record that I did right at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was a special project that I felt very close to as well. And so Bob of Arcadia Records wanted to do a retrospective of my music, of my previous 8 releases, including some of the songs from the album that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic and didn't do anything or didn't get attention it perhaps deserved. And so what the world needs now, and a second one called The Last Muse, are retrospectives, which are including a lot of the music from the record that was released right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay. So, but it has to feel good now to have albums coming out with kind of this post-pandemic era we're in. How does it feel?
Um, well, it always feels good to get music out there, and of course, you need it to get heard. Um, I'd like to say that things have picked up to normal again for me, but one place where I was very popular was Russia and the Ukraine, and of course that's not happening anymore. And tours are like a rolling, tours are something where one it builds. If you're traveling, it's easy to piggyback that with another country. But if for whatever reason things slow down in a particular region, it affects everything. So I was kind of affected by all that. I think I'm starting to travel again with some consistency starting this fall into the new year. But yeah, I'm always wanting to get new material out, and so to that end, it feels great. A lot of the things that we did for the reimagining of or these retro releases of music was reconfigure some of it or re-edit it to make it more radio friendly. I had one particular piece called The Last Muse, is a 13-minute song. Well, that doesn't play well on radio, so we edited that down to 5.5 minutes. The jazz world, what are we thinking? Pursuing what we consider to be artistically true to ourselves. No, that doesn't work in the commercial world. So we trimmed a bunch of stuff down, which is for the better for radio.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this new project?
New project, as in what the world needs now, or the new one that's still in the can.
I guess we could say both. I mean, what's kind
Right.
of your collective hope now that people are mingling more with music and getting in there and getting music and seeing it live?
Right. Well, I'm hoping, of course, that they're able to visit / revisit some of these past releases, and in particular the album Dressed in a Song that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, to get its fair opportunity for people to latch on to it, and perhaps see some things that they hadn't seen before, because at the time of those releases, they didn't benefit from the digital streaming platforms that we have now. I mean, I guess you can't have both worlds. I mean, we didn't have these digital streaming platforms when some of this music came out. Now we do, but now you don't have CD sales. I mean, it's
Yeah. So let me ask you this: how do the crowds feel? Are they different now?
In as much as I haven't been playing with the regularity that I have in the past, and that I am in the future, the crowds coming out of the pandemic felt hungry. They felt hungry, which is good. And I don't know if it's a place that I've gotten to now as a performer. I played within the last week, and I almost felt like I couldn't do anything wrong. That the audience, they're on the edge of their seat. Maybe, they suffered from the pandemic too, not just artists. So the tangibility, the being able to actually go see music again, and there's maybe more of an appreciation. I don't know. I've been feeling something, and I don't know if I've been able to put my finger on it. But yeah, there's definitely something palpable in how audiences are reacting now. And I don't know if that's me or if that's them. I'm sure it's a combination of the two. I find I'm more grateful to perform than I was before, which is, I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but now I'm grateful. You got a babysitter, you paid for parking, you did whatever you had to do to come out. Thank you for listening to this music. And I almost feel a compulsion, or I almost feel maybe it's a compulsion that I have something to share with you. I have something to share with you now. And I don't know if I really had that urgency before of, hey, listen, take a listen to this for a second. I really have something to share with you, versus the getting caught up in all the BS mind stuff that maybe had gone into that occupied my mind for some percentage of, how do you look? How's the patter? Now it's a very sincere thing of, man, thank you for coming out. This next song is really about this story. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to talk to the audience, but I really want you to get what I'm saying this time,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think that one of the things that was a fear when this was really raging is that, people were leaving big cities, younger players, were they going to get into a craft where there was no future potentially? How do you see the jazz community right now as it kind of comes back and rebuilds? Do you think it's stronger than it's ever been?
I don't know if I can speak to that. All I can, what I've noticed is a lot of people leaving. You don't have to be in New York to pursue this craft. A lot of great players are feeling that they can hit this from other places that maybe, and again, I'm only speaking as someone who lives in New York. Man, during the pandemic, I got to have some grass and trees, and maybe the pandemic, if anything, kind of led people to a mindset of, what is it that I really want in this life? And all right, maybe I don't want this city life. Maybe I can do what I do from anywhere, and the craft has nothing to do with where I live. Of course, there used to be a whole MO of New York musicians, and I followed this path as well. Is come to New York, make a name for yourself, so that you can go play in Europe and make real money. And I mean, that's what Miles did. That's what everybody did. And also where the appreciation perhaps might have seemed to be higher. But now I don't know how important that is to be in New York anymore. It's easy to say once you've established yourself as a player here, but I mean, it's difficult here. And I see the young people, I hear things like, I can't afford Harlem anymore, I'm moving to the Bronx. I don't know how a student graduates from college as a jazz, or even just becomes a jazz musician and has to make it paying these exorbitant rents in New York and surviving here. I mean, I just don't know how. So from that vantage point, I see kind of a trend with the younger players kind of saying, we don't necessarily need to be here. We can move to Europe, we can move to Nashville, we can move to wherever and still have a fruitful life and get the most out of it on more than one level of just the struggle of making it in New York, but of enjoying, nature, of enjoying kind of zeroing in on what is it that's important to me as a human being.
So let's get into the good business here of the best place to pick up the new material, live shows, anything pertaining to your world.
Right. So on pretty much any DSP, on any streaming platform, it can be purchased, whether it's the Bandcamps, whether it's the Amazons, whether it's the whatever. The new record can be purchased, and it can be heard, of course, on Spotify. And as far as hearing this music in the future from me, I'm performing in New York October the 7th. I think I'll be on the road in September in Armenia, and then I'll be playing in New York again in November, and out of the country again late part of November into December in Europe, in the Netherlands and some other places. And then in the new year, it looks like Italy and Germany and France, in particular places like Duc des Lombards in Paris and the Blue Note in Milan in the new year. And so, as I said, things are starting to pick up again. And for me, I'm not a sideman, so I can't pick up sideman work. So it really has to be me. But I'm excited about new music that's coming out. and to get back out there on the road with some consistency again.
Well, JD, it's so good to see you on the other side of this whole thing. So
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
thank you for opening up. I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Sounds good. All right.
Thank you.